Making a video. Yeah, I've been busy real life stuff, so I really haven't had time to do the videoing thing. Thought I'd try an HD, so I'm not going to edit this or add anything to it. Yeah, it just is what it is. Anyway, do it in pieces. So I was thinking about the word thing again. Words are really important. You know, it's a philosophy. Yeah, what a surprise. Words are important. Yeah, and so no one's really getting it, but the words are, you know, just placeholders. We use words as, you know, ways of creating a symbol for something, a surrogate. Words are surrogates for the real thing, and the fact that there is a real thing is the whole point. You know, there really is a itness and isness, and you know, all these words really do have a. They describe a function, or they describe, you know, something that we can describe as a set or a category of properties. But that's really all it is again, properties and categories. And the categories you get put in, the words, the words, right? A category is a word, merely becomes a property. So, in a sense, it's just the words. You know, the words are just describing what has been assessed to be, and we've created words that we can agree on what they mean. And so that's where the only thing where things kind of go foul is when, you know, we can't agree on the meaning of a word. I can say suffering, and you could say stub toe, when I'm thinking, you know, brain tumor. You know, that kind of stuff gets in the way. The importance or urgency, the scales for measuring things. Some people are thinking feet when that's not going to work because it's, you know, happening in miles and miles and miles. You know, so we're at cross purposes because our terminology isn't compatible. Don't have the same reference. And therefore can't do the same kind of controlled exchange of words. Yeah, pretty much. You know, that's a lot of the subject of philosophy, is just establishing, you know, that these words do mean something. And conceptually, you say a word like evolution, and then you have a whole description of what evolution is. And it's also made out of words, and the important words would be things like crude, you know, pointless, you know, pretty much a waste of time and energy, and you know, millions of failed experiments kind of idea. You kill 1,000 to create, you know, one winner. You know, not a very good way to construct a kind of machine. You know, I wanted to say the word a kind of perfection, but then that would be, again, you know, people will have the wrong understanding of that word. They would think perfect in all senses rather than perfect just in the mere category of, you know, perfect at surviving, you know, by the crude standards. Winning a badly designed game may not make you a great person or player. You're a great player of that kind of game, you know. So if the game allows horrible cheating and the winner is a horrible cheater, you know, yes, they've been perfected by the game, but what they've been perfected to be, you know, what the definition of perfect is based on the category that the game falls into, stupid, isn't great. So anyway, longer than I meant to go on this element of the subject, so more later. Yeah, as time permits and such. Alright, I'm back again, I think. Yep, pretty much. I'm going to find better lighting. Well, it's as good as it gets. Anyway, alright, so the category is, or the property, the word, you know, evolution. And the subwords are sort of the description, right? So you'd have subwords like cruel, inefficient, brutal, nasty, dumb, uninformed, unaware, uneducated. Did I say crude? No, I said cruel, I think. Crude, cruel, those two words kind of go together. Yeah, dumb things do cruel things. But it's not intent, so that's the tricky part. Cruel in effect, cruel by intent. So it's one of those words that can kind of screw things up, as it can have more than one meaning and such. But, there you go. I mean, it's pretty much described by a bunch of words that kind of get to this idea that it's not productive, it's not efficient. Efficient is a great word. In its production of game, okay? And the game is what? Okay, is, silly entertainment. And you can see it in well, these would be more complex sentences. These aren't just words. But in what entertains us, there's such a triviality to it. And you can see that in movies. There's cartoons and stuff. They have the cliche things that people like to do. Have a party, play some music. This is the big fun, we're having. And then, and that's pretty much all you've got, except for outside of the romance fun. And that can have an awful lot of drama strings tied to it, and pain and hardship. So love isn't exactly profit. I mean it. It's double-edged, as most of this is, and by reasonable evaluation, rubbing your fingers across the blades, you can see that the edge of the potential negative cuts deeper. It's a lot sharper. There's a lot I'd give up, like everything, to avoid the worst of it. Just no doubt about it. There's no best of it that I would come anywhere close to having the worst of it to have. And there is, I think, for, reasonably speaking, there just isn't any best of it that you would pay the worst of it to have. It just isn't. I mean, all the best of it's just are unimaginably pale by comparison to the worst of it. And I think much the same can be said about everything else that fills it in, the filler. So anyway, but the words like best, worst, these are all concepts that exist. They didn't need our label. They didn't need us to spell it, or write it down to have the concept be valid. The concept is what we were describing. We first find the concept in reality, and then we find a word to describe the concept. And the concept is usually a list of properties, or a single property. You could call wetness a concept, but you could also just call it a label of a property. So anyway, yeah, okay. So maybe I'll just throw in one more of these and call that a video, or call it a video. Yeah, 3 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, so much to do. Preposterous amounts of things that I have to get done. The next day. Okay, anyway, till next time. Getting on back. Anyway, so continuing, sort of. Yeah, so most of these words are pretty solid words. You know, they describe things that are real: grass and trees and crunch and stomp and smash, and they're just you don't need to argue too much about the meaning of them because we all kind of agree on them. We sort of understand the context in which they're used, and what's appropriate and inappropriate in terms of the weight we give them in describing something. Let's see if I can get the ferns in the picture. Maybe. Yeah. Ooh, there's all kinds of sun and tree stuff going on over there. Look at the yellow. Very bright. It's almost like some kind of sun or something. Anyway, right there. The only thing left to argue really is this optimism-pessimism thing, the real values of the good and the bad when mixed together. Because it's really hard to make a calculation about, well, there's the good of preventing some suffering, some harm, or maximizing somebody's comfort, or the ease with which they obtain some kind of comfort. And that has value because it's replacing the alternative condition, which would be misery and dissatisfaction, let's say. And then there's the other kind of problem where you don't resolve a discomfort, where it's a substantially brutal and harsh reality of years of dying. Little cat in chair. It's sort of cute. So you can get that in the picture. There it is. Cat in chair. Yeah. So it's just kind of an argument about whether there is some way to state, for the purpose of some universal standard, some standard, and we need some kind of standard of some kind, to judge how much you're going to impose on something else, or assume a right to assume for them that they will think what you've given them is in fact a gift, that they've profited from the experience. Cat cooing. Yeah, nice timing, cat. Yeah, I'm going to video him, but he's cleaning up his poo area now. Yes. Anyway, just throw it in there for the hell of it. Makes the video all that much more charming. Anyway, I really can't be just rambling. So anyway, all we really have is an argument about whether there's an objective standard, and I guess what I'm saying is, what I've often said is that in the extremes, I think we know that there's really not any room for disagreement about what small good, happiness, joy, pleasure, and how much you'd pay for it. And that if you were to start many of the traditions we have, if you were to put them on the political ballot as propositions, even things like football, and you pointed out how many kids got paralyzed and blah, 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 because people weren't yet addicted, because they weren't attached to it, I think they would recognize that, oh, that's really doesn't sound like a good idea at all. So outside of the attachment, without the attachment, people, I think, could realize that you don't pay that kind of price for something trivial and replaceable. And it's all just entertainment for us anyway. So our entertainment should be molded rationally to be as free as possible. So there's lots of ways to gain fulfillment in life. Lots of stuff to do besides having babies. Because having babies does involve a huge element of risk. And, just because you want it doesn't make it a rational thing to do to somebody else, to subject them to that risk, without consent. It's not a gift then. Something that dangerous can't be considered a gift. The nuclear jack-in-the-box or something. But anyway, I've sort of made those arguments. So, which we can disagree maybe, about subtle descriptions of what's on one side or what's on the other in terms of a success or a failure. But in the broad sense, we would know certain things are failures. The Holocaust was a failure. There's certain plans and ideas and ways of obtaining some kind of good aren't going to be worth the price you'll have to pay for them. Certain shortcuts and, like Fukushima, it wasn't worth it. Okay, the money saved wasn't worth it, for sure. Some of them are pretty absolute, universally. Everybody can understand it as being, yes, that's not anywhere close to being functional as an option. I could say, you get a Twinkie if you have a year of chemotherapy. And everybody would agree. It's a universal truth that would be a bad deal. And so it's just the more subtle questions is where the conversation gets more aggressive in terms of claims of what can or cannot be said. But again, just recognize that the default cultural circumstance is that people are presuming to say for others. They are doing it right now, and they're not doing it with any better evidence. Their optimism isn't founded on anything except its existence. That's it. It is, therefore, they'll impose it. And that's as silly as saying because you have the ability to kick an old lady in the ass that you should. And that's not true. Because you have the ability to do something doesn't mean you should do it. Pretty obvious. Doesn't mean that it's cost effective or practical. So anyway, enough of the video. Till next time, and such.